In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And I'll stop there for a moment. So, when you find like a huge major action in the Bible, like something earth-shattering, you tend to find the Trinity. Like all three persons are mentioned in some way usually. So we had a few verses there. Where is the Father? God the Father. This is going to be the most obvious one.
Now the other two are more obvious to me. I feel pretty stupid.
In the beginning, who created the heavens and the earth? God. And that's usually in the Old Testament shorthand for the Father. So like everybody, when they've been reading this text, I'll say like Jews, Christians, everybody will be looking at this and going like, oh yeah, it's the Father. So there's no question that he was the one who's creating all things in the beginning. What about the Holy Spirit?
The Spirit of God.
What was he doing?
He was hovering.
Over what?
The waters.
Interesting.
Both the waters below and the waters above. I believe I posed this question.
Yes, we'll be getting to that in a little bit. And yes, the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, and there's some significance with this, because it's a very spiritual thing that he's trying to do right here. Hovering is a good approximation of what the word's trying to do in Hebrew, and it is kind of giving you the idea of, I guess you could say, acting like a dove. And that's typically how we think of him in the New Testament, because he descended like a dove at Jesus' baptism. Oh wait, baptism includes water too. Huh. Huh. It's almost as if this is by design or something. Anyways.
Terrible with sarcasm.
Really, I'm terrible at
I think
sarcasm.
you're amazing with sarcasm, Pastor.
Anyway. And where is Jesus?
I know this one. Are we going to go to John 1:1 yet?
We'll go there later. It'll be there to flesh things out.
Oh, and God said, "Let there be light."
Yes. So we have the Word of God, and the Word who is made flesh is Jesus. So we'll get to that in a bit. But first we'll try to deal with everything going on in Genesis 1. Okay. So with the first two verses, this is introductory. And there are different interpretations of this, and I'll say they're wrong, because the Hebrew actually does point us into what's really going on. Now, unfortunately, I have to get into technical terms with Hebrew to actually tell you what's going on. But I'll say that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Like, that's background information. Because some people like to say, well, the age of the earth must be in such and such an order of billions of years. So obviously this passage must mean that the earth was around for billions of years before God started creating on it. Now, even if people do adopt that viewpoint, they still get into trouble, because you still have a period of time for human history as depicted by Genesis and the other books being about 6,000 years. So even if you try to grant that, it's still hard for people to try and reconcile this with the most popular views of science right now. And I say most popular views of science right now because science changes. Like the theories come in, they update, they change. Like even the Big Bang right now is having a lot of issues. And I say a lot of issues, but yeah, I don't think people want to acknowledge some of them. I'll get more into that if you would like me to. Anyways, so what we actually find here is in the Hebrew there's specific forms of verbs. And the forms of verbs can tell you, well, how is this functioning in a narrative? Now, for anybody who's watching this, who knows something about Hebrew grammar, so you have the vayitol, or as people usually have it as the vav consecutive for the imperfect, but vayitol. That gives you the main narrative, or at least the signal of the narrative, and then you have the katal, which is the general perfect form which falls after that. But the vekatal, or as you would probably call it, the perfect consecutive, with vav consecutive, that actually makes background information for this. So what we find is the first two verses are in vekatal, or vav consecutive katal, or perfect, I mean. And it's actually giving you background information for what's going on in the main narrative sequence, which actually begins in verse 3, when God is actually making light. So this is more what we are finding in, say, the book of Hebrews, when Hebrews starts talking about God creating out of nothing in Hebrews chapter 11. Because what the author of Hebrews is trying to say is, well, yeah, there was nothing until God actually started speaking. So you don't have God really speaking here in the first couple verses. He starts speaking in verse 3. Okay. Technical stuff out of the way. So let's get into day 1. So I'll just do this. So day 1. God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Okay. So what did God create here?
Everything.
Not just
Not
yet.
everything, but like
Light.
Earth.
He created light, specifically. And if you want to be very technical with a whole bunch of stuff, you could also say EM waves, or presumably you could even say that he created, the one of the fundamental forces of the universe.
Electromagnetism.
Yeah, electromagnetism, one of the fundamental forces of the universe. So, in order to have an EM wave, well, now it actually needs to travel through something, so God is also implicitly creating space and time, and energy, and like,
matter.
yeah,
Well,
pretty much.
Energy is matter.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so this is usually why I say space, time, matter, energy, because they're both linked. And philosophically, we can get into a lot more linkages than that, but we're seeing that God is actually creating some of the fundamental forces and dimensions of the universe already. So just by voicing this into existence, there's so much going on. All right. And how does the day go there at the end of verse 5? So what does it progress from to what?
There's evening, there was morning.
Yeah, evening to morning. Why would that be?
I know that, went from there being darkness to there being light.
Yes. This is also how the Jews, or Hebrew people in general, measure a day. They don't start from midnight going to midnight. They're beginning at sundown, going to the next sundown. So it's always darkness going into light. So for them, they're fundamentally seeing time as the extension of creation. Yeah. This also comes up with a lot of the different phrases about God's salvation, where something's like a light has appeared or is coming out, and because it is God creating this. So we see absolutely a progression going through. day 2. I could spend a lot more time on that, but we should be moving. So day 2, I begin in verse 6. God said, "Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above it. And it was so. God called the expanse sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. So what did God create here?
The astronomy bit of the earth. The astrophysicist in me says gravity. Really?
We're getting a little bit closer to the earth, but you're not wrong.
The firmament.
Firmament, yes, or the expanse. Sometimes it is called the firmament. So I'll favor expanse far more so. And that's to deal with the word. So the word itself in Hebrew is referring to something being, well, basically expanded out. So if you have a chunk of metal and you're hammering it flat, so you're expanding it out, that's basically what the word means. Now, unfortunately, some people are going, well, that must mean that there's a firmament. That must mean that all the Jews believe there was an iron dome in the sky. And no. That's not exactly what happened. Yeah. But we're looking at 2 different uses of the root of that word. So the root of the word means to expand, and in one sense you can actually have that as expanding metal, like pounding the metal flat, or it could just be an expansion in general. So I'm more of the opinion it's an expansion in general, and then from usage, the other usage that people just came to understand it more as a firm solid. And you do find, say, even with the Hebrew writer Philo in the 1st century BC, that he's somewhat defining the sky as a thick sheet of ice. Like it's just all ice, so when it melts, that's when you get rain and nothing. However, you do find in the book of Job, and this is when Elihu, when he's speaking in chapter 36, I believe. No, sorry, 37. He's actually giving you a description of the water cycle. That water comes up from the sea, goes onto the land, rains down, and then it keeps going. So it's not as though the Hebrews in certain generations had, well, basically a very unscientific point of view where you just have an iron dome over the sky, or that is the sky. It does seem to come in at a different point in time. Anyways, and you do have the expanse, but you have 2 other things, important things that are being made. Because, well, it's an expanse within what? Well, yes.
Separate water from water.
Water from water. So what would the water underneath be? What would be, like if you go out and you see the big blue wet thing?
The ocean.
Ocean.
Yeah,
Sea.
you have the seas, the oceans. I'll use the word seas because that typically comes up a lot more in scripture. Like they don't really have the word for ocean, but you do have sea, and this is also interesting because sea, in some sense, is representative of chaos. Because the sea can be calm, and then suddenly in the next moment you're canceling ferries because it's going up and down and even there and there. Especially for ancient Israelites when they're trying to make huge voyages on a sea, even the Sea of Galilee, and you have this little tiny boat. Yeah, it doesn't always go well. So sea is sometimes seen as the force of chaos. So So this also comes up different places in the Bible, including one of the creational chapters, Job chapter 38. And God talks about the sea as being birthed, if you will. And it is chaotic, but when God's describing it there, he's talking about it in terms of, well, it's a baby, it's throwing a tantrum, so then I have to put it in swaddling cloths, I have to put a boundary around it, I have to put a shore around it so that it doesn't overstep its boundary. So you can be chaotic over there in your little playpen of the sea, but for everybody else, God has to make sure that you're kept well. Yeah. So then you have what's above that, and if this is above the sky, this is the waters beyond waters. Now, this is going to be something that you will not get because it has to deal with Hebrew wordplay. So, the word in Hebrew for waters is mayim. And this is interesting because it's always in this form, which is a dual form. So we only have singular and plural. Hebrew actually has a dual. So you could use that for your two eyes, your two ears, etc., etc. So water is always in the dual form, so it's always waters. But if you're referring to heaven, whether it's the sky or God's domain, it is shamayim. It is beyond the waters. So now it makes a little bit more sense why the Spirit was hovering over the waters. He's hovering over that which is, by and large, spiritual, but has some implication for the creation. So if we're looking at the creation of the sea here, we're also going to be looking at the creation of heaven. So this would be above the expanse, above the sky, which is what you might call the second heaven, or outer space. The third heaven would actually be the throne room of God, like the actual heavens, how we understand heaven to be. But yeah, there's a distinction between these two heavens. Also, but not here, I would argue that angels are made on this day. Cross-referencing Psalm 104 and also Job chapter 38, I would say angels are made on this day, which also makes sense if you're creating heaven. But I won't go into that right now. Okay. So, day 3, verse 9. And God said, "Let the water under the sky," so the sea, "be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered seas he called seas. Gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So this is what you were hinting at before, where you're saying, well, yeah, he made the earth, and he did, because there's the sea enveloping it. But when we think of the earth, we're thinking sea and land. So this is kind of more where it's coming from. So I'll say here, earth in terms of earthiness or soil. This is coming through. But we're not done. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it, according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, the third day. So we have plants. And most likely we're also getting somewhere microorganisms, because quite a few plants need these to survive, just like we need microorganisms to survive. I'm putting it in brackets there because I don't know specifically. God doesn't lay that out here. What you also might be starting to hear is that the Bible isn't trying to pretend to be a scientific taxonomy. Like, if you're opening up a biology textbook, the Bible isn't pretending to say, like, yeah, I'm trying to work all of these things into these specific categories for that you're putting them into today. But basically, yeah, you have plants in general, but
Phytoplankton and zooplankton. Yes.
yeah, sure. This will become a little bit more obvious as we're hitting the next couple days. But yeah, the Bible isn't trying to pretend to be a scientific book. It's trying to just communicate the bare ideas of what's going on. Questions, comments? Yeah. Okay.
It's pretty straightforward.
Hope so. So, day for number 4. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the sea to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there is evening and there is morning, the 4th day. So, what did God create here? Maybe I'll use the red. Yes.
And the stars.
And stars. Okay. So, do you see the sun or the moon actually given a name? No. Yeah, they're just kind of spoken of as the lights. So, in different ancient religions, who's usually at the top of the different hierarchies in those ancient religions?
Typically, the god, the sun.
Yeah,
Or the sun.
it's usually the sun god. Sometimes it's the earth deity. Sometimes there's battle between them. Sometimes the sky deity wins out amongst them. But sun deity is usually the one that's pretty high up there in the apex. So when God is creating the sun and the moon, we seem to have an intentional shift away from giving it a name. And this could be because God doesn't want the sun or moon to actually be worshipped like it is in other cultures, ancient cultures. So he could just be going, well, yeah, this is just another piece of the creation. It's not a god for you. Because there would also be, say, like different deities in different religions who would be like gods of the sun, say like Apollo, but he's still born of other gods. Yeah. Like he wasn't even the first sun deity within the Greek religion. There was also Helios. Yeah. And then his cult was battled for a period of time by the sun disk cult of Aten. I like that story because Akhenaten, who's the pharaoh who was doing that, known as the heretic king, he actually tried to have a monotheistic religion following that sun disk. And I'm like, yay, step in the right direction. You didn't get to God, but you took a step in the right direction. Woo. Anyways, but yeah, it might be very intentional to not name them so as to not confuse them with actual deities. However, as you might have seen in some of the sermons that I did preaching through Promises of Stars, sometimes stars are used to represent angels themselves. So yeah, sometimes you could see a star being represented as an angel, but not terribly often. And it also seems somewhat deliberate in the scriptures. Anyways, so what else was actually made here? This is a little bit more abstract.
Time, sort of. No,
Sort of,
way to
yeah.
measure time.
Yeah, measure time. So you get, I guess we could say seasons. So as to mark seasons and other occasions that things will progress on the earth. Because you have light in general here, but if you just have constant light rays bombarding the earth, that's not necessarily good for us. Actually, not even necessarily. That is absolutely bad for us. If the earth just stopped and then one side was being bombarded by the sun, the other was not, half the world would fry to death and the other side would freeze. So, then people at the very edges, they might do okay. But the vast majority of the people on earth would die. So yes, we do need these things to work well. Okay, so day 5. So beginning with verse 20. And God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky." So God created the living creatures of the sea and every living and moving thing with which the water teems, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the 5th day. So God created
Fish and birds.
birds, we got fish. Also keep in mind, this isn't a very scientific taxonomy. So you also have, say, like flying mammals. Yep. And you can put aquatic creatures in general, I guess.
I feel like it would make a little bit more sense for God to make the sun and moon and stars on the 3rd day, considering how plants rely on the sun.
Hmm.
I don't know, this is just something I'm kind of hung up on.
Yeah, sure.
Intelligent design. They didn't originally need design.
Or maybe
Well-
it was just the microorganisms who don't actually plants.
Right.
So,
Or maybe
Well-
because the sun and moon were created, there wasn't a sense of time that the plants had.
I would say that would be more the sense of it. Because what do plants need from the sun? Because obviously they're not right there on the sun to get something from it directly. So what are they actually receiving from the sun?
They're receiving light.
Oh.
Specifically light, which has
Yeah.
already been created. But even
Yeah.
if we're going by literal days here, if a plant has been created, it's a seed in the ground. It doesn't need light yet.
That's correct.
So, do you think that the plant life hasn't grown yet?
Ah, no, it's not.
Okay.
But
So we haven't quite gotten to it yet, but so would Adam, when he was created, was he made as a zygote and then he had, or going even further back, I guess, an egg and a sperm, and then he had to do
No,
something.
they
They had to
nuts.
make something in the soil. Yeah. Anyways.
but also with the sun and the moon, wouldn't
Hmm.
that also come along with temperature?
Mm-hmm. So we would definitely say that, yeah, this definitely looks to temperature itself because we're looking at the Earth turning, but we're also saying, well, if there's day and there is night still, so there might be some sort of shift within the light. Now if I were to kind of wax scientific, when we're looking at the origin of the universe, and this is going to be using the Big Bang model, what they're doing is they're trying to go back as far as they possibly can. Now, I can't remember the exact amount of time that they presume that they've already looked to, but they're saying like, yeah, we got to about,
I think it's 13.8.
oh no, I mean like they're able to map out
Oh, yes.
back to just after like 1/32,000th of a second or something after creation. That's what they're presuming to do. But before that time, they have absolutely no idea, given the physics that we have now, what could have gone beyond that. I'm probably off in that, because I know that they're talking about Planck time, and Planck time is actually far smaller than that. I just can't remember the Planck constant off the top of my head, because that only came up in I think it was like grade 11 physics, and I usually just memorized all the constants that came in engineering. Anyways. But if we're looking at this, like, we can reasonably say, based on modern day scientific principles, we can go back and assume this and that, but we don't know exactly how light is functioning here. Now, the interesting thing when we're going to be looking over into the Gospel of John and seeing, well, how is light described there? Well, Jesus will be not this light, but the uncreated light. He'll be not the word that God speaks these things into existence, but he will speak, but Jesus is the uncreated word who speaks words, specifically these words. And what John says there is that, well, in him is life. He is the light and therefore the life of all. So if we're looking at light, well, maybe there's a little bit more to just, well, what we would call light. Maybe we're talking about something more substantial in terms of life being permeated through all existence, and then God is just kind of solidifying these things as time goes on. Hard to say. I'd actually just have to ask him when I see him.
Because if sin hasn't entered the world yet, so there's no death, so I'm still on the plants thing. We can argue that the plants don't even need light. Yeah.
This is interesting. Okay.
That is
So what we'll find,
Because they have the light and the life. They don't need light from the sun.
what we'll find is plants don't count as living creatures. Because, well, actually, this is interesting. So we have the word creature here, and this is actually coming from Latin. Yay! So a creature is something that is created. Yeah. But when we're actually looking at the Hebrew for this, it's actually using the word nefesh. And nefesh is the word for soul. So day 5 is when we first get souled creatures. We don't actually get any of this on day 3. And when we're looking to, well, in the paradise, when after humanity's made, spoiler alert, they're being given every plant for food, them and all nefesh, all souls. So we know that plants are living and growing, but they're also dying, and that's because they don't have nefesh. They do not have soul. So according to the biblical taxonomy, they're not alive. Again, this is why it's going to be disagreeing vastly with us in science today, because we're going to say, well, plants have life because they can grow and change. But we also see that they have significantly different cells than animals do, whether they're flying or they're swimming or they're crawling on land. But yeah, there does seem to be a significant break between them.
Makes sense.
Yes.
So back to the spoiler.
Yes. So we're going to day 6 now. So verse 24. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the air and all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Okay. So what's going on day 6? Specifically, what type of animals?
Land animals.
Yes, specifically land animals. So there's a few different categories. I would say land animals would make a little bit more sense than livestock as the NIV is translating it here. And that's just because it's just referring to, well, bigger animals on the land. But the next category is kind of a little bit more literal translation would be swarming things. Well, lizards, maybe not vermin, but yeah, lizards and other little things, creepy crawlies that you would imagine, the things that just kind of skitter. So, locusts, for example, would also be considered that because the word is used of them.
Can't wait until he makes platypus. Those are he must have had fun with those.
Yeah, where would we consider platypi in the biblical taxonomy? Are they aquatic creatures? Are they fish or are they
They're
land?
mammals.
I know, is that according to the biblical taxonomy?
They're representations of some of the most intelligent design.
Well, I'd actually have to try to speak to a rabbi on that because I haven't really tried to think through that before. So rabbis who have spent a lot more time trying to work through it might be able to offer a little more on it.
Do you think God had fun creating platypuses?
I think God had fun creating everything up here.
Well, yeah, well,
Let's
yeah,
consider the
this is,
platypuses. Like he seemed to really let his creative spirit
Yeah.
shine.
Like I said,
Well-
intelligent design at its best.
because in general, this is all about love. So of course he loved all these things because, well, now he's creating something to love, to benefit, to give something to.
How are wasps that benefit? They hate wasps.
Pollination?
They are filled with
Pollination.
hate. I've never had a good experience with a wasp.
Well, what about the Ebola virus? You think it's not exactly filled with malice because it's a virus, you can't really think.
How much positive experience have wasps had with you? Ask
Fair.
yourself that
Yeah,
question.
exactly, yeah. So we can see like deviations through the creation once sin has entered into the picture that things aren't working the way that they should.
It was crazy, yes.
But with a lot of the animals that we interact with, they only attack us because we're invading their territory. They're going after something that they want. And well, they should respect the image of God within us, but that's a subject I'll get into in a
Perhaps
while.
they know the sin that's in our hearts.
They're punishing me.
But they also know the sin. Well, if we're sinners, then like, oh, what? Can't deal with that.
Oh.
But swarming animals and wild animals, so things that would be closer to desert regions. And now that I'm using the word animals, I realize, oh well, yeah, this would also be relatively useful for. So, do you know the Latin root for animal?
Animus.
Things that
Well,
move.
That which moves.
Yeah.
Having
That's right,
animation.
soul.
Of course.
Right.
Anima and animus are used for soul. So something that moves is an ensouled being in the Latin language.
When will I get one of these ancient
Well, you
technologies?
got You're on the right track.
Okay. Speaking of souls, who else was made on day 6? Adam and Eve, yes. I'll put it kind of in a category. So I'll put humans,
Yes.
but Adam and Eve specifically. And yes, You got
Yes! Finally! Where's my prize?
I forgot to bring stuff out. So
You
there's
get,
some things in my office.
You get the rest of the pot of spaghetti.
Yay!
I think I'll pass.
Oh,
Sorry, Bachelor.
I know. This is fine. Anyways, so we got humans there, and then we also have kind of the ordering of dominion, that all things are placed under the dominion of humanity, and this seems to be more in relation to the image of God than anything else. So humans, in the image of God, are basically told that all creation is under them, which makes sense because God created all things, so all things are under God primarily. So if he places something in his image, then the rest of creation would be under them. But if we're also looking at, well, what is God's responsibility to the creation? Well, he's ensuring that life is continued throughout the creation. He's giving it everything that it needs to exist. So with humans, if we are living in the image of God, we will respect and honor and cultivate the creation. But we also know that if God is creative, then human beings will be creative. That we might try to order the creation ourselves, make a nice Garden of Eden in the style of an English garden. Sometimes that's what people say when they kind of envision heaven. It's a nice English garden, and like, well, that could be your part of heaven. I don't know about mine. But it's heaven, so we have so many different possibilities of what could be there. Anyways, but we also can see that the most creative part of living in the image of God, as God puts it here, is to be fruitful and multiply. God is the creator, you are now procreators. So be like God and create, cultivate, raise, and honor and cherish your children. I won't go quite as far as say like the Catholics who say you have to make as many children as possible.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, the child is the ultimate expression of the creative act for human beings. Okay, I don't know if I want to know what's going on there.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Okay.
So, with this done, might you see a little bit of a pattern going? What is it? No, okay. I didn't draw things like this by accident.
Yes,
I see it, but I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah. So what we're seeing is like these are the days of like the fullness of creation, where you have the light going out, you have the expanse of the sky and the waters, then you also have the earth coming out, and now these are the days of filling, that God is looking to what has been created and he's actually populating it. So the light has been made, therefore light sources are being made. The sky and the sea have been made, now you have creatures to inhabit them. The earth has been made, now you have animals to inhabit the earth, as well as to feast upon all the said plants. So yes, there's a prevailing order here.